I think most everyone has been let in. So let's get going. Welcome to this Wet Cement Press reading with Richard Jackson and Karen Donovan. I'm Thoreau Lovell, the publisher and one of the editors at Wet Cement Press. Michelle Murphy and Barbara Rother, the other editors, are also here. Wet Cement publishes about 3 to 5 books a year. We focus primarily on poetry and creative memoir and hybrid text and image books, but we also do publish some fiction. We did a novel a couple of years ago, and we've got another one planned for the spring. So you can learn about the books and about our submission guidelines on our website, which is www.wetcementpress.com. And both Richard and Karen's books are on sale there through the end of the week. You can save a couple bucks on each book. So I think we're going to start with Richard Jackson, and then Karen will read afterwards. So here we go. So Richard Jackson is the author of 19 books of poetry, including The Heart as Framed, New and Select Poems, and 12 books of essays, interviews, translations, and anthologies. He was awarded the Order of Freedom Medal for literary and humanitarian work during the Balkan Wars by the President of Slovenia. Wet Cement published his book of prose poems, Dispatches, in June, just this last June. These are quiet meditations from the bent heart of time, where philosophy meets the refusal to wince. These poems feel and see so much to such an intensity and degree that they seem to explode the difference between joy and sorrow into a kind of seamless grace and aching peace. Please welcome Richard Jackson.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'm really pleased to be reading with Karen Donovan. And I see a lot of familiar faces here, which is nice. I'm going to be screen sharing these poems. I want to say first, I began these poems kind of on a whim when traveling a few years ago, just based on observations, sometimes mixing in things from current news. We tend to spend a lot of time in the woods, but when I travel, it seems to be most often to different cities, mostly foreign cities. There's a lot of science images scattered throughout because basically I began in engineering school, went to engineering school for a year and took up guitar and songwriting, but I have no voice and a mediocre guitar player, but so that left the words. And so here they are, basically. So let me see if I can screen share this. I found it a lot easier for people to follow along when they see the text in front of them. So these first two were prompted by 2 philosophers I was reading at the time, that the whole issue of like fake news and QAnon and all that stuff was, conspiracies were coming to the forefront. So this first one is called Another Farewell to Truth, and it has an epigraph from the Italian philosopher Gianni Vattimo. It just simply says, politics can no longer be thought of in terms of truth. The late sun bleeds its own light across the surface of the water. A yellow butterfly sips a little life from the edge. Someone has left an out-of-date history book on the bank. Beyond these hills, the winds are trying to decide who controls the dust they kick up out of the ruins they have made. The tiny lizard with its tail chewed off has a question we'll never hear. A cloud of gnats keeps shifting direction over the surface. Each evening, I understand less of why we are here. It is as if our shadows slip downstream without us. And this one, called Nothing at All, has an epigraph from Sartre, which says, "It is therefore senseless to think of complaining, since nothing foreign has decided what we feel, what we live, or what we are." You think you have been here before, and time starts to wobble on its axis. Path you are on is not the path you are on. The robin can't find its nest. There are sounds with no source, roots that lose their way and break the surface. There in the middle of the woods is a stone wall that stretches 50 feet but marks nothing, belongs to nothing, stands for nothing. In the distance, a shaft of light falls on nothing in particular. There's nothing to say, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Your own watch stutters its alarm. Complementarity, this refers to principle in physics. And I was looking at this man in a park and dealing with those same questions about truth. So the idea in it is simply how in physics two opposite things can be true at once. Thinking he is alone in the park, he thinks of the mind as a seesaw where the two children rock back and forth. On the one side, he is still alone in the park. On the other side, he rises above even himself. In that version, he sits alone with the buzzard and a dying maple. This is not the world he wanted to escape into. The day wears itself out like a used toy. The wind twists through the trees. One thought follows another with relentless regularity. He wants to erase himself into another future. This is when he calls upon us, because it is we who have been thinking this. The mind is a clone of itself. So those questions about truth and how we speak it lead also to consequences in the real political world. So unstable. You try to find a word, a metaphor for it. The rust destroying the rose bush, the odor of decay in the compost, the grotesque masks we put on in our histories, the church graveyard with its unanswered questions, the cauldron of terror each shimmering star hides. But nothing compares to the feeling you get for the room where the Yemeni child, dying for lack of medicine, amuses herself by playing feeble shadow puppets against the molding hospital wall. I also, in some of these poems, wrote these little prose poems as letters back to friends. And this is to my friend Ata Mohariri, who was a former student here in Chattanooga and is now a poet living up in, an editor, living up in New York, and one of the great critics also. So this is a letter to Ata from Sedlich Ossuary Church in Kuntnahora, Czech Republic, which is a very strange place. It's a bone whose it's church whose inside is all, the architecture is all bones, mostly from the monks that were part of that church. In the end, it doesn't matter whose bones are crossed with yours. What comes after bones is the dream of bones. There's a skull of small lizard just behind one of the monks. What is missing, you said, is blood. There are 400 miles of blood vessels in the brain, 100 billion neurons. Lin Zhao, in prison for 20 years, wrote everything in his own blood. All those sense impressions, all those feelings, where do they go when we go? Wycliffe's bones were exhumed after 20 years and burned at the stake for heresy, not far from here. Paleolithic peoples emptied the brains from skulls, then buried the skulls in the center of stone circles to receive the tribe's new dreams. Each of these cells dreamt of being other cells, but left no words to tell us who. What do the words in our poems dream when we look away? Only in dreaming a thing does it become real, Ezekiel said. Only in silence do we hear what we need to hear. I can hear a lot of people still coming in. So this is called Two Galaxies. I spent a lot of time in Italy, and one of my favorite places to stay is across the river from the main town in Trastevere. So this is simply an observation from one night as I was sitting in a piazza. It's called Two Galaxies. The woman watches the fire juggler in the piazza below spin twin galaxies from her outstretched arms. The tourists in the piazza don't know she is there. She's not sure herself, living in the distant memory of a memory. Every time she wakes and comes to the window, something has disappeared into the broken wormholes of her mind. She half shutters the window. Every word is an invention she's not sure will work. The galaxies merged and split apart. She remembers in that flash the secret word she protected with the other girls, like an ember still trying to glow. The lighted mosaics of the Chiesa Santa Maria hover over everything as if they were beyond this tiny universe. She no longer is sure what it means, but what it means is all the word she has. On a hilltop in Trastevere is a place where St. Peter was supposedly crucified upside down. And so this poem is called Belief. From here, the world still looks upside down. The news records the blossoming silence after the bomb goes off. Words vaporize. There's a new honor killing someone tries to sell as love or religion. Below here, even the cemeteries try to shrug off despair. Maybe time is a lizard emerging from the cracks in the stone wall. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was emerging from a dream that died here long ago. The courtyard pigeons grumble at anyone who doesn't believe. An anxious wing tugs at the window at Peter's sign. I think the old man against the wall must be him, must know what is coming as he tries to brush away the first stars with a wave of his wand. And the autumn fog is set in a small town in southern Slovenia, when a lot of migrants were working their way up through Serbia and Hungary towards Germany, which Hungary borders on Slovenia. A few birds guard the chimney tops, waiting for clarity. Another has slapped the window, amazed to have met himself that way. Everything is in disguise. North of here, a few peaks breach the surface. Some types of birds will fly in ever-narrowing circles to approach their invisible roots. The backup warning of the delivery truck seems to sound from everywhere. It is as if we were waiting for the world to surface, waiting for the net to bring up its bounty. Or we are all spiraling down towards something we can't see. We have just a few words for a compass. It seems the roads have led to the end of time. East of here, a group of refugees pray for the fog to hold them safe for the night. We often go out towards Tucson, where we have a couple of friends, the poets Pam Ushuk and Bill Root. And so this poem is based there. The heavy light holds everything in place. Trees, clouds, birds, the distant highway hum. Even our dreams seem locked safely away. For a moment, it seems like we could lose nothing. The old stories seem painted on the air. The ancient wall paintings have refused centuries of weather. They are scuffed tracks here, whose age we cannot know. Polos is what they call them, the name they gave to those who walk from far south of here to nowhere they could walk. Coyotes begin to rub now against the wall of the coming dusk. I should have mentioned this, the form of this is a Hebron, which is a prose poem followed by a haiku. Okay, and this is a strange little place, Trentco. in Slovenia. It's, my friend Boris describes how, who is from Slovenia, describes how in the winter people skate on the very shallow waters, maybe just a foot deep or so, which disappear in the dry months. And the land is porous limestone, and underneath are underground caves, rivers, and lakes. And Jason and the Argonauts supposedly visited here and describe it in that work called The Hidden. It is all limestone here, porous, where the lake disappears into another world beneath this one, like a nest in the hollow of a tree. It is here even when it isn't. It's a question of belief, of faith. One time as a boy, I tried to hold a shaft of sunlight like a spear that had come through my bedroom window. What we see is already something else. After the Big Bang, the universe went dark, not even believing in itself, just bubbles of ionized gas, until the first stars emerged. That is always the way. Night gathers in pools by the roadside. They hold within them galaxies of other times and places. It was Jason and the Argonauts who must have figured the world was shrinking back into one atom when they visited here. After it didn't, they invented another theory. This is the case with every belief, disappearing into itself, into whatever it is we believe we saw. Okay, and I'm actually going to end with a poem that's not in that book. Thoreau mentioned the work I'd done during the Balkan Wars in Yugoslavia. And what's been happening recently in Ukraine reminded me so much of the things that we dealt with in those times. And so this is called The Crows of Borodianka. The day itself seems to tremble, as if it's from a tank's vibration. But they have left except for a few charred hulks. A few shadows lumber across the streets as if their clouds denied them. But it's the crows waiting in the skeletal trees for the dogs to finish that is the focus here. They know. They sit with a silence that catches on the throat of the sky, like drones recording the cyclist shot dead, the woman carrying what's left of her life in a sack. Left for weeks, the bodies grow to twice their size. There's enough left so the crows don't need to argue. Meanwhile, they note the roof slabs leaning against the honeycomb shells of former buildings, like tombstones, the red and yellow swing set standing amidst the rubble. Father Petro Balog says it was Christ who was also raped and tortured, crucified again. I think the crows know where the mines are buried. Even Arendelle, 28 billion light years away, must know what the stench means. The day trembles like a solar wind through the universe. Nowhere to hide. A few bayonets of light cut through the ruins. Our few tortured words are never enough. They lay around like unexploded shells. I would have to learn the language of crows to understand. And thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Richard. That was great. And sorry for the interruptions with the people coming in. I didn't realize that made noise that you could hear.
Well, it happens even when you're at a live reading. Somebody
True enough,
in the
right?
back, and
Yeah,
it always creaks.
right. At least people can't order cappuccinos here, while you're reading. So our next reader is Karen Donovan. Karen Donovan is a poet, publisher, and printer who lives in Rhode Island, where she works in the nonprofit community as a writer and editor. Where are you, Karen? She is the author of Planet Parable, Your Enzymes Are Calling the Ancients, and that's a fantastic title for a book. Fugitive Red and Aardvark to Exodal. Wet Cement published her latest book, Monad+Monadnock, earlier this month, just a few weeks ago. And these are clever, razor-sharp poems that foreground a contemporary absurdity so ubiquitous that it often goes unnoticed. Donovan's observations about our crazy-ass, self-involved world, emerging from her often hilarious focus on the vexatious anticlimax of our moment, are framed by a subtle exploration of Leibniz's metaphysical yet scientific monad, and Emerson's physical yet transcendental Monad+Monadnock. This book is a mind-stretching tour de force, as entertaining as it is thought-provoking. So please join me in welcoming Karen Donovan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Thoreau. And Richard, thank you for your beautiful reading. It was so lovely. And I'm thinking that Leibniz, who is the not the inventor of the monad, but certainly the promoter of the monad, would love that piece called The Hidden. There's something very Leibnizian in that. So yeah, I'm going to read, I'm trying to get myself here so I can see. I'm going to read from the book. Here we go. So I'm going to read from this book. Start at the beginning and sort of leap through it to the end. I picked 6 pieces from the monad section and 6 pieces from the Monadnock section. Mix it up. Our leader sat under the sun. She had a gun pinned to her lapel and held a sheaf of wintergreen in her right hand. In her left, a scalp of unknown origin. Her throne was of purest gold. You'll note from the look in her eye, she was wishing for a cushion. The landscape was indeterminate, a lake, a banyan or two, a few courtiers unscrolling scrolls. One began, be it so known, skimming another, devastated by your silence. The pull-down menu lists many more options. That's me in the lower foreground, figuring in sand. My caryatid was always mistaken for a man. Her great ham hands and unshaven calves, her set gaze, her obvious lack of wings. No one knew where she had come from, and she liked it that way. Her duty to let the other women tend the goats, to contemplate undisturbed her billion tiny globes. She would not be opening her robe. Through windows, the moon scattered coins of archipelagos across the floor, every island a flawless stepping stone. She sang the music each world would make, bouncing down the marble stair, its echo, its spectrum, its cloudy air, its spin. Hypothesis 6. A crane operator working parabolas out in his mind, a few surrendering robins, a nickel heads up, interferonic dreams the other side to sideless, a moth that flies out, in, out of a room, like a moth, like beauty itself, moth-like, beautiful, a moon that leans all its weight away. An adolescent strike we keep forgiving it for. There's also a confident expanse of water. The hot pile was a good name for Fermi's baby, accelerating under the west bleachers. The colder that year got, I still like to say it, pile. I woke up and I was you, persuasive as tide. If you can imagine, instead, a constant avalanche, an orange repealing itself off the plate in a spiral, one kid running the bases both ways, as if and is as if, and is as if and is. Kale. Was it his aftershave? He was always so hinky, what my great aunt called bad shoe. Inevitably, small animals died whenever his name came up. Each night I pounded my brow for a ceremony, recalling all that time under the same roof, the silly balloon game he loved. I did get an equation on the tip of my tongue. It tasted like lace. This poem is called "I Love to Stand on the Backs of the Turtles," and it is dedicated to the St. Gaudens turtle statue that used to be in the middle of downtown Springfield, but it was dug up and now it's stored somewhere, so no one can see it anymore. So this poem, I think, is the only thing left of it. I love to stand on the backs of the turtles. Night opens the oaks above me, above a bench where a man rolled in a coat is dreaming the acorns are stars. Across the square, water falls into a dish of pebbles. Acorns drop sparks. The man sleeps under newspapers. As he breathes, the prices of stocks rise and fall. Water falls from bronze turtles with hooked jaws, each tail a spiked curl. Two pike leap from a globe. No cupids. Beneath the leaves the oaks let go of, this man dreams. His lover's breasts are moonlit, apples he climbs to touch, and as he falls, he cries and knows he is awake. I walk in leaves. The acorns are moons, stamped by streetlights. I love to stand on the backs of the turtles while water falls into water and the pool never fills and never empties. I carry my house, my 4 red rooms, to the edge of a pool of circles of water, this city, all clear to the bottom. Flex. In the midst of arriving babies, I paused to watch the swans snipping up green plants in the lagoon, then drifting, heads tucked on the tide. Another binky floated by. I lassoed and pulled him in. Tethered there, the babies jostle in the wind like balloon bouquets. The strings, of course, confuse. Many administrators are now needed to figure out whose is whose. Such is history, woodbine and bittersweet, sang the swans asleep. Now that the world is no longer strange, I hang up by their laces my punch-drunk hands. I hang them up and leave them swinging against the wall like shadows, like hands pretending to be birds. Now that the world is no longer strange, I scroll my limbs into 2 dimensions and become the ribbon and a traveler who takes the ribbon. I set my foot on the ribbon. The world rises before me, a stone seraph weeping and sniggering. The tears are real. Everything is real. I give the stone my face to dissolve, the way gasoline contorts and colors and streams, rainbows and gutters. I find I need my face no longer. The flowers are real. The vipers are real. Creation is singing. Now I'm in the second part of this book, Monadnock. I'm just going to say something quickly about monad and monadnock. Of course, it's a play on words, which I love. But the book itself is kind of an explanation of the predicament that I find myself in sometimes as a poet, caught between the idea of the monad, which is the absolute, simple, indivisible unity behind all things, and the monadnock, which is the mountain, the actual physicality of the world. So I'm constantly going back and forth between the unity and the multiplicity of the world. So that is kind of what this book is trying to get its hands around. And we could talk about monads forever. This poem ends with a line from W.H. Auden. Not a conspiracy, not an accident. She stands up and says, make some trouble. Looks out at Manhattan. Go on, go down to Mississippi. And now you bring up that word, toxin, a stain, a spreading, a pealing of bells. He stands up and says, shove that job. Do you believe in rock and roll? Outside the Civic Center, it's way below zero, but inside, the groundlings' faces shine like stage lights. People, I want you to put your hands together. A few arrests, quelled disturbances in neighboring blocks. Coincidental beachgoers pause over their peach pits. What was that? Reports come in from the body politic. Something is going to fall like rain, and it won't be flowers. Story of an origin. About how in the beginning it was strong yet viscoelastic with certain properties that distinguished it from sheet metal. About how you can walk out on it for ice fishing in January. About how it flows when warm, like asphalt. Oh, how light it was, which made it advantageous for aerospace applications. Hallelujah, how there was no darkness in it because we had had enough of that. About how it made everything, except for everything that wasn't, since there isn't anything else than what keeps on getting made and remade from ingredients the experts dispute. About how non-linearly it iridescently was, hard to predict, with a tendency under load to deform. As worms grow wings, hillsides implode, bones rattle up from rotor-whipped sands and begin to sing like flutes about how in the beginning it was. Throw the deadbolt, Darlene. It is my shift at the bureau. I step in wearing an oilcloth coat, yank my key from the lock. One hallway bulb glows peach-like in midair, then fails the imitation. It is a night I dream of my father, whom I miss now more than ever. My best friend departs the territory, carrying enough seed to start over. At dinner, none of the hot plates will work. Periwinkles gleam in a faraway bay. Our children witness indelible events. A few umbrellas blow out. Still, we seek a faithful copy of reality, right down to the make-believe ending. We offer the prisoner an airy sweet, fresh tacks for his hands and his feet. We tie prayers in strips torn from our shirts, the shirts we were reportedly born in. So I do know which desk it is. My chair is already warm. The oyster listener. He admires bats. When panic hits, he stands in a doorway. He decodes your end from your beginning. If methylated, he gets intoxicated. On weekends, he's enlightened by your doubts. He calls you by accident when you feel erasable. The tide was never his friend. Occasionally, he leaves the planet carrying only a small valise. No one would guess he's homeless. A cryptic appearance conceals a lepidopteran, is an acrostic for his prayer. And then the last poem in the book is called Monad+Monadnock. I zoom a kestrel as it swoops off in the direction of the water bearer. With our field glasses, we can see it all from up here. My friend, the critic, who switches lights on and out for a living, asks me if damson truly has an edible isomer, if kestrels signify. Doesn't the uncanny valley still broil with the simulacra of empire? Isn't this yammer and bristlecone so much waxed paper? Her feet hurt from our climbing. She wants her marmalade lunch. I would draw my answer in longhand, but what I've got is one parsnip. If the endoplasmic reticulum knows more than it's telling us, if voltaic zircon can be reliably trained, if we unearth the index fossil from this layer, if teasel, sargassum, etc., we will have more insight into the never-ending possible. Pasta bowl, she objects. He said, never-ending pasta bowl, the guy on the TV, as if that matters to me. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Thank you, Karen. Wow. Just so enjoyable to hear you read those poems. So I just shared the link for both Karen's book and Richard's book in the chat. If you guys are interested, you can click on that link and run right over to pick it up from the bookshop. And thank you, Richard, as well. Thank you all for attending. It's so nice to see a great audience. And I think what I'm going to do now is just unmute everybody, and you guys can say your hellos or your goodbyes, or ask all to unmute. Maybe you have to unmute yourselves. I don't know. Try it.
It worked.
All right. So we are recording this and we'll put it up on the Wet Cement Press website in the next day or two. And so if you know anybody who would enjoy it, who didn't have a chance to tune in, then you can send them over to the website. It'll be very obvious where to go. Anything else? Barbara, Michelle, anything else we need to?
I'm really curious where Monad+Monadnock is. I've heard of it, but I don't know where it actually is. I know it's in Massachusetts, or where is
It's
it?
in New Hampshire.
It's in New Hampshire. Okay. So, yeah.
I had to look it up.
We have to look it up. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So is it a place you spent a lot of time, or was it the word or the place?
I have actually never been there,
Oh, okay.
but I have seen it from the top of Mount Greylock, which is in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
On a beautiful day, with my friend Betsy, who is in this room, we looked north, and there it was, sticking up out of the New Hampshire plain.
Isn't Mount Greylock where Melville and Hawthorne were walking? Isn't
Yes,
that?
indeed. That's in North Adams, Mass, right up in the corner of the state.
Yeah.
Yep, that's another beautiful mountain.
And Thoreau was actually, oddly enough, Thoreau
Yes.
was actually wrote about Monadnock.
Right.
It's a nice little walk up that mountain. It's a small, very small mountain.
So many beautiful lines. I'm just so delighted. It's such a rich reading with both of you. Wow.
Mhm.
So much beautiful work.
Okay, well, I think we'll just say thank you again. And thank you, Richard and Karen. Thank you all
Thank you.
for joining us. And hopefully we'll be able to do it again soon. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to hear both Richard and Karen read in person one of these days, one of these places soon.
Do you want to leave it open a minute, Thoreau, if anyone wants to talk?
Sure, if anybody wants to talk, go for it. You may have to unmute yourself. And if you don't, you can sign off. I'll just leave it open for a few minutes and then we'll see what comes of it.
Karen and Richard, thank you both.
Thank you.
So lovely to be here with you. I think this is the most people I've been with in 2 years.
I'm captivated by both of your words and stuck in my Zoom awkwardness.
Yeah.
It's hard to articulate, but you both open up vast expanses in a very short period of time and create places that will draw me back again. So I appreciate the experience of both of your works.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, I was looking forward to the reading and it was a wonderful reading by both of you. So thank you very much for it.
Thanks.
Lovely, lovely books.
Yes.
And now you're going to make dinner.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. Really great to hear your voices after seeing your words. So likewise, really appreciate it. Thanks.
Karen, how long did it take you to finish this last poem? I mean, I know the words just come to you, but I know some of it's very taxing. How long?
It has nothing to do with taxes, Lynn. Yeah. These poems are, very short and pretty short. So they all seem to want to go together. They've been written over a process of years. But they, when you write poems, you never really know how they're going to work out. So they collected themselves, I think.
So at what point in the process did you realize you had this two-part book, and that that the poems were falling on one part or the other?
Yeah. Well, I had written the poem Monad+Monadnock, and it seemed basic to me. It seemed like it really presented or put out the issue. And when I was looking at all the poems and trying to figure out what they wanted to be, that poem just kept becoming more and more thematic. So so I just divided the book in two, and the poems just, there's the monad section and the monadnock section. They just seem to fall into place.
So sort of after the poems were written, then
after they were written is when I put the book together. So, but I think, and Richard, it's probably true for you too. It's like, your mind is working on a lot of different planes at once. So you might work on certain kind of pieces and then other kind of pieces, but they're related in family ways, and they make themselves known, like what goes with what. And it could be over a period of quite a few years. You don't really know what to do with work until you finally see what's happened, what that pile means.
Yeah, most of the ones in this book were organized by places. When I traveled to different places, different countries or parts of this country. And yeah, I mean, I always like to cross current, sort of counterpoint one thing against another to so that they almost act as metaphors for one
Hmm.
I like the way you solved that. Well, not that you solved it, but to play with those issues, Karen, of the spiritual and the more worldly, or the more interior and exterior, or however you come to it. But that I just thought it was brilliant to make that explicit in sort of the organization of the book. So I think. Go ahead.
Did you say I actually solved it?
No. I meant that you weren't attempting to solve it so much, right?
I thought the conversation afterwards around Monadnock with Emerson and Thoreau and Hawthorne up here was like a statement of the theme of the interior and exterior worlds.
Right.
Yeah, Hawthorne actually has a story, Ethan Brand, that's set on Monadnock, North Adams.
Well, the Monadnock section begins with a quote from the poem Monadnock, and it's just two lines that I picked out of Emerson's poem. Ages are thy days, thou grand expresser of the present tense. It's worth going and finding that long poem that it's really a praise poem to the mountain.
It's hard to be in New England and not run into those people who wrote about everywhere there. Like, there's so many huge stretches when I was living in Massachusetts that, people could point out where Melville mentioned this or Hawthorne mentioned that. It's very storied mentionings. But I think that's not, I think when you go to those places, I feel that the fact that we go to them having heard them in these poems or in these other works, like change our experience of them. So I think that there's an echo between the landscape and those who write about it. I find that really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I remember when I went to Thoreau's Lake there and realized that he didn't spend all that time there. He kept going into town for supplies and things,
Right.
warm up.
Kind of changes the story.
Yeah,
I think
isn't
his
there
mother
like-
did his laundry.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he went home for dinner a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Behind every great man.
It's a good dinner.
gosh.
Kind of apropos of the way the poems went and Walden Pond, when I visited there after a week of vacations on lakes, I tried to swim across the pond. And I did that regularly, and it had that strange greenness he writes about. But somehow at the center of the pond, I got turned exactly 180 degrees. And then when I looked up, I was about a third of the way back where I started. There's something of that directionality and mystery in both of your poems.
Beautiful. Nice to say.
We can never really get out of Walden Pond. Is that what you're saying?
I couldn't. I had gone off. I had veered off course before, but I had never done a 180 while I was swimming straight.
All right, I'm gonna need to run myself. So
Okay, yeah.
I don't know, Barbara, you want to just hang out and you can, I don't know if you can end the meeting. Maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe meetings don't need to end. Maybe
I think we need to turn this over. So
maybe they can just stay open. And you guys wander back in an hour or two. Maybe I'll be sitting at my
someone
desk.
else will be here. Maybe, could be good.
Maybe we'll
Okay,
do
I'm gonna sign off.
the
Okay.
after
Thanks
dinner
again.
reading.
Thank you for the extra conversation and time. Nice.
You're welcome.
Thank
to
you,
meet
everyone, so much for
Thank
your.
you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you,
Total
Karen.
joy. A total joy. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks, everybody. It was great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Karen, I'm so proud of you.